I saw Jack entering the bar and greeted him with a smile. Even though it was early and the bar was almost empty, I was hoping Jack would join me. It had been a while since we hung out because Jack was busy with something in his life and couldn't make time. I tried calling and emailing, but I couldn't get in touch with Jack. I even tried to visit Jack's home and office, but he was never there. I hoped his issues were resolved, but the anger on his face showed otherwise. I stood up to shake hands, but suddenly Jack punched me hard in the jaw, knocking me to the ground. My head hit a nearby table as I fell, and I spat out a bloody tooth in shock. Jack stood over me, ready to hit again, accusing me of knowing and laughing at him with my wife, and helping Amanda cheat. My swollen jaw and likely concussion made it hard for me to focus, and I couldn't make sense of Jack's words. The only word I could say was, "What?" Jack continued to strike my ribs and legs, shouting about my wife and me helping Amanda cheat. Other bar patrons intervened, grabbing Jack and pulling him back, while the bartender called the police, and luckily, a patrol car was nearby. The ambulance took longer to arrive, and I was helped by strangers and placed on a gurney for transport to the emergency room. I lost consciousness before the ambulance even left, drowned out by the siren. When I woke up, I realized I was in a hospital, not in a nightmare, but in reality. As I regained consciousness, my wife Claire entered the room with tears, apologizing and explaining that she had left briefly to call my parents. I sat up a little and tried to gather my thoughts when Claire sat down and took my hand. Sleep and medication reduced the swelling, making my words more understandable as I recounted the events to Claire. I didn't understand why she was apologizing. I fell silent, looking at Claire, and she whispered an apology, saying that he hit me, thinking we were helping her cheat. It seemed foolish. Why would he believe we'd do something so awful? What kind of awful people could harm someone they care about? I glanced at Claire as she lifted her head. Something seemed off in her behavior. Maybe I was crazy, but her behavior was suspicious since she usually spoke her mind, especially about relationships with close friends. She might have been shocked because it wasn't what she expected. Just as I was about to ask her what was happening, the doctor came in and said my jaw was bruised, not broken. If I didn't have a headache, I could leave with Claire tonight. My head hurt, but something was clearly wrong with Claire, so I lied to the doctor that I felt fine to leave. Time passed. Nurses worked diligently with documents, preventing me from asking Claire. They were silent on the drive home. As Claire drove, we didn't even turn on music, we were silent the whole way. I needed answers, but by the time I got home, I was exhausted and just wanted to sleep. After changing clothes, I fell asleep. Claire curled up next to me, hugging tightly. After my shower, I joined Claire in the kitchen. Still in pain, but with a clearer head, I saw Claire deep in thought. Finally realizing I was there, she asked, "How are you feeling now?" "Okay, but I have a small Hitachi, and everything hurts. I just need a day of rest, and I'll be fine." I still can't figure out why Jack went so crazy. I took a sip, and continued. "Did Amanda say anything to you? Have you talked to her since yesterday to find out what happened to him?" "I chatted with her a bit yesterday, and she was as shocked as I was about what he did to you." I looked at my wife while she spoke. Her response seemed measured, but there was something more. She appeared sad, which was unusual given her typically upbeat personality. She seemed reserved. I thought maybe the attack had shaken her more than I initially thought. I reached out, taking her hands in mine. "It's okay, honey, I'm fine, I've come to my senses." Soon, my shirt was wet from her tears. We hugged with the words, "I love you." Holding each other tightly, we both called into work and spent the entire day at home. Something besides physical pain bothered me. None of it made any sense. Jack's sudden attack, accusing us of helping Amanda cheat. Claire's sudden change to being timid. Her vague answers to basic questions. I wanted to press her about her conversation with Amanda, but Claire was on the verge of tears. I believed it wasn't the right time to have a confrontation. Despite both of us being at home, we felt distant from each other. I sat in the backyard, observing the wind moving the trees and grass, thinking about the need to understand why Jack attacked me. We had been friends for a long time, and I had never seen Jack lose his temper without a good reason. I considered my wife's words and couldn't remember her ever saying that Jack's wife hadn't cheated and had only apologized for the attack on me. We needed to hear Jack's perspective, and the best way was to hear it directly from him. Even though there was a risk he might attack again, it seemed like the most straightforward way to understand what happened. I planned to discuss with Claire about our roles and what made Jack think we were betraying him. Claire told me she intended to briefly stop by work to pick up her laptop, as she would be home for the week and didn't want to fall behind. After she left, I decided to go see Jack. On the way, I tried to call him but couldn't reach him. I hoped Jack was out of prison, so I took a taxi to his house. If we were lucky, we could figure out what caused the mess and get back to normal. When I arrived at Jack's place, my stomach sank when I saw Claire's car. Instead of ringing the doorbell, I walked to the back until I overheard Claire talking to Amanda. Claire was no longer silent, she was furious. Jack had overheard her talking about setting up a date and having my back, a conversation not meant for him. This explained why he attacked me. According to Claire, Jack heard her say that she'd cover for her and Tom and Jack would be busy, so she could go out without arousing Jack's suspicions. It seemed Jack took it to mean that I knew what was going on. Claire claimed she would have warned me if she knew. It wasn't until I was attacked that she realized Jack knew. He used his phone call to express his hatred towards her, choosing to rot in prison rather than live with her. Claire wanted to sympathize, but it was Amanda who left Jack. Claire's support for Amanda caused serious problems in her marriage, and things could worsen when I found out. She knew it was wrong but hoped for a short fling. Instead, Claire's support led to the worst. Now she must deal with the consequences because of Amanda, who couldn't keep her actions in check. I expressed my concerns to Claire about my marriage being in serious trouble once I found out. She attempted to reassure me by saying that I never cheated, and she would vouch for me if necessary. I couldn't see her, but I could sense from her voice that she closed her eyes and rubbed her forehead while speaking. Despite Claire's effort to reassure me, I contended that I had deceived her, assisted her in deceiving my best friend, and consequently, he attacked me. I questioned whether I could convince her of anything, particularly considering her involvement in the situation. Claire persisted that I hadn't done anything wrong and that I should realize this. Frustrated, I informed her that it was irrelevant, and I had no clue how to resolve the situation. If I didn't have a solution by the time I found out, my marriage would likely end just like hers did. I couldn't believe how foolish I was for helping her. I cautioned her that if I lost it, I would never speak to her again. In an attempt to comfort me, Claire remarked that I had always been a loving wife, and Tom knew how much I loved him. I sarcastically retorted that I was such a loving wife that my support of my promiscuous friend led to my husband getting attacked by his best friend. She insisted that I didn't comprehend the situation and that it would take years, at best, to rebuild trust. I couldn't help but feel foolish, wondering if Tom would ever trust me again. Having heard enough, I calmly returned to the street. My resilient nature enabled me to stay composed and concentrate on the task at hand. While waiting for a taxi, I realized I needed to start making things right, but first, I needed to ensure I had all the facts. It was time to visit a friend. The deceased sergeant and detectives seemed puzzled when I expressed my intention to post bail, but after years of dealing with strange incidents in police work, they simply shrugged. They smirked at Jack's expression when he saw me bail him out and openly laughed when I instructed Jack to remain silent until told otherwise. Perplexed, Jack followed me and quietly got into the car. After I provided the driver with the address, we sat in silence until we arrived at the crime scene. The same bartender was on duty, nervous and evidently afraid of trouble. I quickly reassured him, requesting a bottle of Glenmorangies Signet, 2 glasses, and some privacy. As we moved to a secluded booth, I poured a generous amount into both glasses and pushed one towards Jack. We both drank and exchanged a sarcastic toast to the first drink. I gazed at my friend. I told Jack that I had no knowledge of this plan and just wanted to spend time with him. They took advantage of our friendship to deceive him, knowing I wouldn't agree, and proceeded with their plan without my awareness. Jack observed me closely and could tell when I was not being truthful. It was evident from his expression that I was now being sincere. After his initial anger subsided and he calmed down in prison, Jack was able to think rationally about what I had told him. He expressed how his heart was broken by her and my wife Claire assisted her. I expressed my frustration, mentioning that I had given everything to our marriage, only for it to be wasted because she chose to be with another man. I refilled the drinks and simply listened to my friend as Jack vented his frustration and anger about his marriage. Once the whiskey and discussion about the event eventually calmed Jack down, he apologized for the outburst. Jack admitted that he probably should have talked to me first, but he couldn't control himself. The realization that his marriage and our friendship were over made him feel helpless. As much as it hurt that she cheated on him, the thought of me betraying him was even more painful. Cheating was bad enough, but the idea of me mocking him hurt even more. He sincerely apologized. I smiled and sipped my whiskey, saying it was okay, as I probably deserved it for having an affair with his sister during the Christmas holidays. When I inquired about how he discovered her infidelity, Jack shook his head and explained that he had sensed something was wrong in his marriage a few weeks ago. He suspected she was cheating and was preparing to hire a private investigator. While he was at work, his phone started showing video and audio from the Ring camera on the front porch. The motion sensor was triggered while Amanda was picking up an Amazon package. During a phone call, she arranged to be intimate with someone and mentioned that I and Claire could assist her, just like before. It didn't seem like I was unaware of what was happening. It seemed like I was actively involved in the deceit. I stared at him in disbelief. 2 marriages had ended because Jack's wife was unfaithful and forgot about the camera, and Claire had also cheated. Tom hadn't considered it, but it made sense that she would do the same. She covered for Jack's wife. He was almost certain that Claire hadn't cheated after overhearing their conversation before picking up Jack, which convinced him she wasn't out for a walk. Tom questioned why Jack wanted a divorce, considering Claire's faithfulness. He thought forgiving her might be easier if she had been unfaithful with someone else. For him, the issue wasn't betrayal but trust. She not only repeatedly lied about her actions and Jack's wife but also used their friendship to cover it up in a deceitful way, making him an active participant in the deception. He wondered how he could remain married to her if he couldn't trust her anymore and if his best friend hated her. He believed trust could be restored but clarified that he didn't trust his wife at all. He also acknowledged that Claire loved him, prompting Jack to ask if he was sure this was the end. I expressed my belief that trust, built over time, was not stronger but weaker, and while people may forgive, they never forget. He had no intention of spending the rest of his life hoping that, in years to come, this would be just a faded memory. I asserted that Claire knew what she was doing, and there was nothing she could say to solve the problem. It was time for him to leave and start over. Jack envied his friend for having an amicable divorce, and they would both remain on good terms. Jack joked about trying to find a Mexican brothel to get Amanda the right job for her skill set and pay less child support. I laughed, expressing awe at Jack's ability to see life as it is. It felt like his world was ending, but he knew that in the long run, he would be okay. He went home and talked to Claire, and since she already knew what was going to happen, it would likely be relatively smooth sailing. She cried and begged for counseling, but she understood that he would not be able to come to terms with her behavior. I recognized that it was out of character for her, and she knew it. It was time for him to take a new direction and look at his life with fresh eyes. The chapter in his marriage to Claire was over.